there and welcome to Lorena's Labyrinth today. Today we're going to be taking a look at name numerology and the influence of names on the personality, and we're going to look at it in a bit of detail. But before we crack on with it, I want to just remind you, actually, first of all, I want to say, in case you haven't been here before, my name's Anah, and what you've got with this series is basically the equivalent of a workshop. So I've tried to deliver a numerology workshop online to give people the means of looking at their own numerology and seeing their own divine footprint, if you like, of their life path and this kind of stuff, and to get understanding and empower them around how they are living their lives and to live that life worth meaning to them that everybody sort of dreams of doing. So the idea is that you can do your own reports by using the content that I put up in this channel here. Now, I do reports. I do paid reports as well, and they're not cheap because they are time consuming, and it's been developed over many, many years of me doing numerology as well. Sorry, I had to take a pause. But either way, it's quite time consuming to do it. And it is something that we all can do if we apply ourselves to it. I mean, obviously, it's the easy thing to go and get somebody else to do it for us. But, it's if people are short of $1, they can do it themselves. They don't have to buy a paid reading or report, if you like. And I just want to also add that I really thank you. I'm very grateful for you being part of my journey here on the channel, and I do aim to build community at some point in time. I also want to make mention that my plans, and I'll refer back to this, that my plans, I've always talked about doing this content online to include things like how to calculate people's divine blueprint and their karmic path. Well, if I decide to do that, it's going to be on a separate video. We're not going to be talking about it today because it's complex and it needs to have some attention devoted to it. Anyway, I'm going to stop rattling on. I'm just going to remind you that when we do numerology, and specifically when we do name numerology, we're looking at the influence of the name on a person. And we do not, when we look at numerology, we don't just do standalone. Because it's so complex, we don't turn around and say something like, well, this person's name is, and that's what their numerology is, and this is what it means, and that's how it is. And the same as we don't look at their day number or their ruling number and just go, well, that's all there is to the person. No, when we're looking at a numerology report, we're doing a comprehensive view of that person, the analysis, and you will too if you do your own. I always recommend people start with our own. It will help to get understanding. It's a very in-depth insight into the life path. Anyway, without further ado, let's crack on. Thanks for joining me. So when it comes to name numerology, this is actually really important because our names are the most personal aspect of who and what we are. They are part of our identity and how we identify. And that's whether we use our birth name or whether we use a pet name or a shortened derivative of our name. And so when we're looking at name numerology, we're looking at the name that we're called by people in our daily life and the one that we respond to. So every name that we use, even if somebody calls it from a distance, I'm kind of pausing as I get this into perspective to be able to deliver it properly to you. Look, even if somebody calls our name from a distance, we're automatically going to respond to it and hear it above any other ambient noise. A prime example of this is I actually suffer from what is called industrial deafness, and this is through exposure to machinery. And I recall a conversation with a person many years ago where they were at quite a distance from me at the shops and they mentioned my name. I couldn't hear any of the conversation, but I did hear my name and I responded. And they weren't talking about me badly or anything like that, but it did actually create quite a laugh for everybody that they can be standing beside me saying my name sometimes and I won't hear it. But if they're standing at a distance, my name will stand out and I will hear it quite audibly. And anyway, so going beyond that, yes, we do respond to it, even if it's at a distance, because it's part of who and what we are. And the other thing is that the vibration of a name will actually change and through what we're called. So a person can be given a birth name, for example, and not use that name in their day-to-day living. And I personally can testify to this because I actually got into a relationship with a guy. It ended up being an unhealthy relationship, but what I found out to be quite funny and amusing afterwards, it's always funny after the fact, was that I was introduced to him by his nickname, and this was the name that everybody called him. And without going into what his name is or was, it was one that reflected a really easygoing personality. He was a great guy with this nickname. However, me being perhaps arrogant or whatever, I decided that because I was in an intimate partnered relationship with him, that it wasn't appropriate for me to be calling him his nickname. I wanted to call him by his birth name, because that made me feel important, I guess, or differentiated me from his mates to being one of his intimate partner. The difference is that actually when he was called by his birth name, it did bring out these other less attractive attributes. And of course, the relationship ended up hitting the skids, for want of a better description. So this is always something that's really important to take into consideration when we are introduced to people. We're being introduced to them as to who and what they are, and this vibration that we talk about is definitely going to influence the outward expression or the behaviour of the person. Now, of course, the name that we use is not standalone because the personality is influenced by other factors such as the ruling number, the day number, and there are other things involved, which I'll go into it across the pathway, which is the pyramids and peaks and all the rest of it. But the idea is that if the person has got a very strong personality, and this is reflected in the birth chart, because the birth chart is going to identify vulnerabilities and strengths as well as the ruling number, then you would look to have a name that actually moderates and balances some of that strength, because it might be overpowering to the other people that they interact with. So anyway, let's crack on, because I'll explain to you in this particular series. I'm not sure if it's going to be 1 or 2 parts until I get into it, but the bottom line is we need to be able to work out in the first instance what the vibration of the person's name is and what the influences are. So let's crack on. So I must say that as I have prepared this video for you guys, I've been trying to look at the most simple way of delivering this content, because it can be complex when you're learning it. Once you've got it down pat, it's fairly easy. But this is another reason why I've got the time chapters and descriptions, okay, so that you can find, if you start to be confused when you're doing more than one of your own reports for your family members, you can easily come back to it, find where you're at, refresh your mind, and then get back into doing the actual name numerology. Okay, so I will try and stick to the content without waffling. Excuse me while I have a cough. So when we're unpacking the name numerology, what we're going to be finding with it is that there are 2 expressions. One is called the soul urge, and this is the sum of the vowels of the name that is used in daily life. I'll break that down in the next video. The other is the outer expression. So what we're talking about is the outer expression is the sum of the consonants, and it's what we observe in a person's behaviour. The soul urge is what they keep internalized, and what most of us don't get to look at unless they trust us enough to confide in us their innermost thoughts and feelings. And for some people that doesn't happen at all because they're so emotionally repressed or whatever. Now, where the soul urge and the outer expression is calculated on the first name of a person, the name that they're known by in daily life. So, for example, if I was going to say, well, my name is Anah, this is what I'm known as, but in my day-to-day life, people don't say, hey, Anah, they say, hi, Anah, right? So Anah is my name, and that would be what I would be doing the numerology on. However, the destiny and the complete name is the first name, the family name, and if you've got a middle name, some people have 2 or 3 of them. That complete name, all of those names need to be broken down and calculated out to get the complete name number, which is also called the destiny number. Now, for your information, I don't normally do the complete numbers because they're not relevant to your average report. They're only relevant in two particular contexts. That is when you're actually going as far as doing the divine blueprint, which is looking at the karmic past life stuff that you've brought into this life, and the karmic pathway for the current life, which is basically your life purpose or meaning, and that's identified in many other ways as well. But the karmic content actually reinforces what we see in the other aspects, such as the pyramids and peaks and this kind of thing, and the ruling numbers. But I'm at risk of going off into a waffle here, okay? This is why I don't always do the karmic stuff for every report that I do, and therefore I don't do the destiny or the complete number with most of the reports that I do, because it's not relevant, and I'll explain why later. But the only other time it would be relevant to do a partial complete name, if you like, would be if somebody was asking for information about business or professional, and so let's say Mel Gibson straight off the bat. You would not, well, actually, if you were doing a business one for him, you would actually do Mel Gibson. That's what you would calculate, because that's his professional name. But if you were to do a destiny version, you would do Melville, I think might be his full name. You would do the Melville Gibson, and if he's got a Christian name in the middle there, you would put that one in as well. But I'm not going to go too far into the destiny and the complete names right now, because it does get a little bit messy, and I would prefer that you get comfortable with just working out how to do name numerology before we look at the more difficult aspects. So just to make it a little bit clearer, the reason we don't worry about surnames when we're doing a person's individual numerology report is because we're looking at influences of the name upon the person, and this is individual, okay? Where surnames are about family groups, it's not particularly related to the individual behaviours or urges of an individual. However, if we were going to do the destiny numbers and that kind of stuff, we would actually have to look at things like, has the person changed their surname? Because especially if the people have married, because that will have a marginal influence on the individual as far as they behave and act within perhaps a work setting or a professional setting. And some people will opt for a double barrel, so we would have to look at the double barrel as well. But anyway, let's carry on. So to clarify here, the name that we work out on, or that we're doing our calculations on, is the name that the person is known by. It is used in their daily life. Now, obviously, we can have the full birth name, which might be Suzanne, and Sue or Susie are derivatives. So it might be a case of her name is Suzanne, but nobody calls her it. So therefore, it's got limited vibration. We want to use the name Sue or Susie, the names that she's known by, because they are the names that carry the vibration. The same with names like Richard that are reduced down to the name Rick. Now, of course, this is more common in the US. We don't tend to see it in Australia terribly much. But if a person is known as Junior or by, what do they call it, JR abbreviations, we don't see this in Australia either. But if that is what the person responds to, that is the name that carries vibration for them. So that is the name that we will break down and do the analysis on. What else can I mention here? Only that in some places, some countries, their cultural traditions is that the person is given a name, and perhaps not even cultural. For example, my grandfather, nobody actually knew that his name was Ira Charles, because throughout his lifetime he was referred to as Norm or Norman. I think his actual full name was Ira Charles Norman, and it wasn't until after he died that his family members, even his children, learned that. So in his instance, we would use the name Norman or Norm, because that's what he was known by. So at this point, it's timely to bring in how we value the letters, okay? When you have a look at this chart or table, what you can see is that each letter is allocated to a number, and the numbers, of course, are between 1 and 9. Now, there's no need really to memorize this particular table. I do, actually. I have it written down. Each to their own. Some people might have a better memory than me. The important thing to remember, though, is that there is a cycle of 9. So The 9th letter of the alphabet is the letter I. The 18th letter of the alphabet is the letter R. So they carry the value of the 9. And if you look at this table, you're going to see the different values. I'm not going to treat you as though you're incapable of understanding what this table means. But what I will say at this point too, just as a point of interest, is that I've done numerology reports on people all around the world, whether it's Australia, US, England, whatever. I also have tested them on people from Borneo, Libya, Burma and Pakistan, because I wanted to test the theory as to whether or not numerology, as I do it, is cross-cultural. And basically, yes, it is. Okay, it works regardless of your country of origin, and that makes sense because at the end of the day, numerology comes out of what is it, Babylon or whatever. So it makes sense that it's cross-cultural. Now, one very important factor that you need to take into consideration when you're doing your name numerology and calculating it out is how you calculate the letter Y. So in the absence of vowels, such as the names I've got here, which is Alice and Bryn and Lynn, if these are the names that people are known by, you can see that there's no vowels in this name. So within this context, the Y would be calculated and assessed as a vowel and be added to the soul urge. Okay, if the person, however, does have other vowels in their name, like Alicia and Brian and Linny, then the Y is calculated as a consonant. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So we start by separating the name into vowels and consonants so that we can add up and do the numerology and establish, obviously, the soul urge and the outward expression. And I've just put this information here on the slide to make it easier if you're going to come back and click on a chapter and try and find out where and what it is to refresh as you go through and do your own. Now, just a reminder, the personality is influenced by the name, but it's not standalone, okay? And we're going to talk about what's involved in the upcoming slides so you can get a better idea, because it's not simply a case of going, oh, well, I like that name, I'm going to have that one. Because if it clashes with the rest of the information in the person's birth date and times, then it can either, exaggerate any potential vulnerabilities and weaknesses, or if we think about it and are selective in the name that we choose, we're going to strengthen that person's characteristics. But not only that, we can use it to modify a very strong personality. So here what we see is some examples of how you could split the vowels and the consonants per the name. Okay, so what I've done is I've used the birth name here is Samuel, and in fact, actually, I've got to say this is actually my son's. I thought I would have a play in the process of doing this and look at the variations. So his name on his birth certificate is Samuel. He's commonly called Sam, and my pet name for him at different times, depending on whether or not he's been a good boy, because he is 30 now, I might call him Sammy from time to time. So either way, we can see that there's different strengths and vulnerabilities associated with the name form. Now, interestingly enough, I actually had a conversation with him in the last couple of days after I did this activity here, looking at soul urges and all the rest of it. And I decided, because that's what mothers do, that I actually felt and believed when I looked at the numerology that for him it would be better if he adopted the name Samuel on his birth certificate. However, I must say he actually knee-jerked at me and told me no way. He liked his name of Sam. He liked being referred to as Sam. And when I look at the rest of his chart, I'm reminded that actually, you know what, Sam is probably a far better match for him, even though I preferred Samuel. And so this becomes timely to remind all of us that actually a person will intuitively know what is the best name for them. And so he's right. There's not, in fact, actually a huge difference for him between Samuel and Sam when I compare it against the full chart. But yes, Sam probably is better for him. But I thought Samuel was. So I thought that I would throw this slide in here, although it doesn't have a huge deal of relevance. It's basically to introduce you to how to interpret this complete and destiny number. As you see here, I've broken it down Now, I also want to tell you, because I'm pretty confident that there will be people like me out there that will go like, oh, well, I might have to give that a go. Now, if you do decide to give it a go, you're going to find the meaning of the numbers, right? Where we say 4610, you're going to have to go and have a look at the content that I've put up for ruling numbers and look at the number 4610. So you would look at the ruling number video, ruling number 10, and find the slide that says 4610 to find out what this meaning is. And the same goes for the 51/6, okay? You need to look at the specific information that's provided in regard to those numbers to understand and see the complete destiny number, because names pretty well, they have the vibration, okay? It's just if it's a ruling number, it tends to have a greater strength and force, but you're still going to get the same thing there with the destiny numbers. So hopefully you enjoy that. So this is not a numerology report, but this is content that I would put on a numerology report, of course, because there's a lot of stuff in there. And if you go and check out the different videos I've got up, like numbers on the birth chart, you'll understand that actually missing numbers have got meaning. And we would look at all of this when we're actually creating a report and doing a full analysis. But as a taste test, okay, what you could do is, when you're doing the name numerology and you're doing a comparison, so let's say there's a parent here, they've just got a newborn baby or whatever, and they know the date the baby's born, the first thing they would do is actually establish the ruling number, which in the case of Princess Anne, because I'm using her, is a 29/11. She's got a day number of 6. When we look at her birth chart, this is the table on the left-hand side, we can see she's got repetitions of the number 9 in there. But we can also see, by that I mean she's got a balance between her mind and spiritual plane. I actually need to break this down a little bit more. But she's not, according to this, super active based on her birth chart. But the reality is that her ruling number compensates for this to a level, because she is basically an inspirer. She inspires action and she leads by example. And we can see this when we look at what's been happening with her throughout her life. So then the next thing we do is we go over and we create a name chart, which this is the middle table that we've got. The right-hand side, we've actually got her pyramid, okay? When we look at her name chart, she has nothing on the mind plane. Now, if we remember, just a reminder here, that just because the mind plane is empty doesn't mean that a person is devoid of capacity to think. It just means that it's not reflected here. And for her, it doesn't matter because it's actually compensated through her birth chart. So it doesn't really matter. But then when we look at her spiritual plane or emotional plane, she is a 15/6. So we've got a repetition there of numbers that reinforce her desire to spend time at home. And once again, she doesn't look particularly physically active. It would be easy if we just went on the name chart alone to turn around and go, wow, she's not much of a thinker. She's more of a feeler. She's more emotions focused. And she's probably more of a talker than a walker, which would actually be completely incorrect, because she's got all these other aspects that come into play. So then when we look at whether or not Anne is a suitable name for her, we would establish, and I'll let you look at the meanings of the outer expression and the soul urge. But actually, I just realised I probably should break down what this 2911 means. And it's a number that's associated with power, discrimination, compassion, and wisdom. Now, there is a risk, say, perhaps with any other person that has these numbers, of her abdicating responsibilities. But we can see, based on the trajectory of her life path, that Anne has actually embraced her role and really stepped into this social and empowering concept. She's always used the gift of her position to try and benefit others, which I think is quite admirable, of course. Okay, so she hasn't, from what we can see, we know more now that she creates a lot of time to spend at home with her horses and that kind of thing, because she's an extremely busy woman. who just blows everybody's mind away. She's so active, but apparently part of her capacity to be able to do what she does, she creates and sets aside time for herself at home, and she squeezes in that time where she gets respite with her animals and in the comfort of her own home, which is vital to her health and well-being. Now, if we want to look at the trajectory of her life path, okay, this is where the pyramids come in, because she's an older woman. In 1976, that's when she experienced her first peak, and that actually should have been quite a spiritual one. It's where she finds her purpose in life. And if we quickly Google what she was doing in 1976, she actually was in the Olympics. She didn't get a medal, but perhaps it could be said that she found her purpose through the disappointment of not achieving a medal. Then in 1985, the highlight or the inference of this number is that she's going to develop and heighten her self-awareness because she will be traveling, she will be exposed to different beliefs and cultural beliefs as well, and that will expand her mind. 1994 saw independence for her, and with her coming into her own. Now, anybody that knows anything about her, actually, I would say that's quite correct, because Anne copped it for a long time. She copped a lot of flack because she is quite abrupt and direct. But at the same time, people started to see her as being admirable, I think, from about 1994 onwards, where she's seen as the glue that holds the institution together through her support of Queen Elizabeth. Her last peak was in 2003. So I'm just making the point there's a lot involved. I'm going to take a look at Williams before we actually get into the specifics. And I'm sorry if it's a long video, but I think it's important to help to interpret the data that you're going to put together. So there are things with Prince William's birth chart, shall we say, and his name and all the rest of it that does cause me a little bit of concern for a future king and monarch. And what I've got to say here may actually alienate me from some of these rabid Wales supporters that we have online. I find the extremists, whether they're supporters of Harry and Meghan or supporters of William and Catherine, to be a bit alarming, shall we say, at the best of times. But I'm going to go through with what I see and interpret from the charts, because I have been watching and observing some of the choices and decisions that he's been making, and I've had to remind myself, sometimes I get a little judgmental and I think, well, he's got a lot to learn. Well, what happens is when I look at this numerology, I actually understand my malcontent, shall we say, with some of his decision making at the moment. So I want to reiterate, I'll expand on that as we go through and you'll see what I mean, but it's not the end of the world. He's still growing. He hasn't reached his full maturity yet. And this is what we see in the pyramids. You know, he's still a young man. Okay, so when it comes to Prince William, the first thing that we can identify is a repetition of a birth number. He has got the same ruling number as Princess Anne. So this is a powerful number, as you recall. The other thing, though, this number actually carries a caution about being too trusting of people that don't actually deserve it. And this was one of the things that I have questioned, where I've turned around and said, who is advising him? Because I think he's making some poor executive decisions at the moment, but I understand his intention is good. But what I want to bring to your attention here before I go into the rest of it is, when we look at his name breakdown, his name, actually the outer expression is associated with the number 6. He has a number 6 in his name chart as well on the mind plane. This is about what he's consciously thinking about. And when we look at his birth chart, his mind is focused, his brain is focused, his thoughts on family and home. So home is up there as a number one priority for him, the home life, being creative and that kind of stuff. The problem is that there is actually an imbalance with his name and with his numerology. So this is why I say it's not a good name for a king. I hope he changes it when he does become the monarch. Additionally, when we look at his soul urge, I have a few concerns about that for him based on this current name when he becomes king. It's not a particularly solid name for him based on his numerology. And I want to make the point too that based on his numerology and his soul urges and that kind of stuff, his soul urge, his outer expression and all the rest of it, there is a potential for him to come across as being arrogant, which is one of the things that I have observed, or I have felt that I have observed. And I now understand, by really breaking this down and looking at again, what I'm actually seeing is the emphasis that is put on his desire for independence, and where he actually is, based on his birth chart, not the kind of person to take advice easily from other people as well. And this is all compounded by his name. So he can, what I have perceived as arrogance, this is him where he might ask questions because he's a questioner, but if he doesn't get the answers, or if he does not get answers that can stand up to testing, rather than turning around and saying, give me more information, he might actually make a knee-jerk decision there of just going, right, okay, based on this information and based on my understandings, this is what we're going to do. But because, we all have limited experience, and whatever role that we're doing, we have to actually rely on our advisors and consultants that have got more experience in a certain field to give us information. Well, the risk here with William, based on all of his numerology, it's compounded, is that he's more likely to go, no, we're going to do it my way because I will learn from my own mistakes. And quite rightly, just so you know, he will learn from his own mistakes because he does have that capacity to do so. But anyway, as another interesting exercise, what I decided to do was look at the fact that with the British royal family, they tend to regurgitate the names of different kings when they go on the throne. And so there's a few options for William. I think this is just my opinion based on numerology. He would be better off picking a different name and not becoming King William. It will not work well for him based on the numerology. And because he's got to honour responsibilities when he takes on the role as the defender of the faith and commitment to the British citizen. So, because he's got this focus on numerology, what I did was I did a comparison. I've heard that he might be looking at George as a potential, in which case I would discourage, because it's got the number 6 in there. It reinforces this focus on the home rather than his role as a monarch. Charles also is not a suitable name because it has got too many 6s as the soul urge and the outer expression. And it might be interpreted by the people, if he was to become a King Charles, that he actually didn't give a rat's about the citizen and all he cared about was his actual family. So that wouldn't bode well for public support. I would advise against George because based on his numerology, it might foster a heightened sense of ego and compound perceptions of arrogance, and worst case scenario, actually have him feeling sorry for himself all the time. And this is just really not attractive in a monarch. I would also discourage the use of the name James for the same reason. It's absolutely unsuitable for him because both the soul urge and the outward expression as a number 6. And I'm sorry, but I have brought it out. I've looked at it, and I think the best possibilities based on numerology is actually Edward, but that might be a bit sensitive, seeing as that was the king that abdicated. So the only potential regurgitation of a king name that's actually suitable for him is Richard. So let's see if he ends up becoming King Richard. Harold and Henry are unsuitable as well, just for the sake of letting you know. Anyway, let's crack on with actually interpreting the numbers now. So down to business. A soul urge of 1 can only occur when there is a single letter A, just one vowel in the name. And so an example is Chad or Jack. And these names represent that the people have got a real need and desire for a freedom of expression. And the way that they will choose to express themselves is going to be determined by their ruling number, whether or not it's one that likes to be solo, whether or not it's an active one. What it means is that there is this need for freedom, and that can include, depending, like I say, on the ruling number, whether or not it's a case of going into the man cave and just having some time out, or for women who've got a social type ruling number, they might want to have a ladies' night out, or whether they're male or female, they might want to be able to take some time to relax, say for reading or for a form of artistic expression. Now, as far as the outward expression goes, which is the way other people perceive them, An outer expression of number 1 can only occur if there is a single consonant of J or S. So examples of these names are Joe, Sue, or Cy. And these are people who need to be offered the freedom and flexibility to work at their own pace if they're to gain any sense of satisfaction and self-confidence in their physical pursuits. And they're definitely best suited to solo activities in the form of work or sports. They might not necessarily be good team players, but they're certainly good solo operators. So the soul urge of 2 is only going to occur if the vowels total the sum of 2 or 20. And for these people, there is this inner desire or yearning that everything has a balance to it. They like to ensure that life around them is harmonious. They prefer natural environments. They're quite intuitive, and they prefer to avoid artificial type environments and even people that are a bit false, shall we like. They don't like the artificial. As far as their interactions with people go, they like to be fair, and they have an expectation that they be treated fairly by those people around them. Now, it might not be immediately obvious because this is an inner urge, okay? And in fact, it might appear on the externals to be quite elusive for them, especially dependent on what's happening with their outer expression number. In regard to the outer expression of a 2, and this is where the consonants are going to total either 2 or 20, these people have a preference for working within a group. They're good team players, but they like that team to be happy and joyful, and where there's some fun happening in it. And they definitely perform best when they're in happy and organised groups where it is harmonious, and that's where they will get their best expression, shall we say. Before we talk about the number 3 in regard to name numerology, I want to draw to your attention that it applies to a soul urge where the vowels total 3, 12, or 21. But when we're talking about the outer expression, it's where the consonants total 3, 12, 21, or 30. Okay, so that is very interesting. Take that on board. You don't have a soul urge of 30. Okay. But anyway, when we talk about the soul urge of 3, it's there's an emphasis that's on the mind. It's the thinking plane. It's the thinkers, and it combines feelings with thought. It's also associated with good rational assessment and rational processing of emotions. And these people are very, very capable of making rational and logical appraisals and assessments of both people and situations. So they would be the calm people in a crisis, for example, or certainly they would be able to hold their decorum because we're talking about an inner urge here. When it comes to the outer expression, these people are definitely funny people. They are the life of the party, and they're usually very quick-witted, and they hold a positive outlook on life. Whatever might be going on in the world that is that might be difficult, they're always the ones that are going to see the silver lining in the cloud, and they're a pleasure to be around. So when we talk about the number 4, as I take a big inhale, the soul urge for number 4 is where the vowels total 4 or 13, and it's a combination that indicates that the holder of this soul urge is actually quite conservative in their opinions on a wide range of spiritual and emotional matters. They can be very orthodox in their approach to life, and generally they're not prone to emotional reactive outbursts. Now, remember, this is the soul urge. This is the inner workings, their inner feelings. And so what this means is while they're not prone necessarily, depending on the influences of the ruling number and that kind of thing, they also might not react terribly well to other people becoming emotionally reactive around them. So when it comes to the outer expression for people, the number 4 for people who have got an outer expression, this is the sum of consonants of the 4, 13, and 31. And if people have got this as an outer expression, they're going to be observed to be the type of people that are doers. They're very practical. They will like to work manually with their bodies and their hands, or even their feet. They might be good at crafts, or they might be good sports people. And this is what you can expect to see if there's an outer expression of a 4. So the soul urge of the number 5 is where the vowels total 5 or 14. Now, it's a number that carries great strength of the soul plane, and as such, it's associated with a greater depth of feeling. And there is also an enhanced need for this freedom and acceptance. So, regardless of the situation the person finds themselves in, if they've got a soul urge of 5, they're going to have a really deep desire to express their feelings, which will generally be strong, unless there are other calming factors in the birth chart and in the ruling number that's going to inhibit some of this freedom of expression, because there can be a lot of, as I say, feelings associated with this. So there's tendencies, shall we say, toward emotional reactiveness with this if it's not balanced out. And what might inhibit their freedom of expression as well, and speaking about what's going on inside of them, would be if they have an arrow of hypersensitivity in their charts, because they might be very concerned about the reaction of people to them if they speak their truth. So this is just one part of it. Now, if we're looking at the outer expression, of course, this is the sum of the consonants, and it's going to be 5, 14, 23, or 32. These people are going to need a lot of physical space, and that will be evidenced by the type of work actually that they choose or that they're comfortable in. They're probably not going to feel comfortable in an office space because they'll feel trapped. So they would like to obviously be working in roles that take them out of the office, perhaps even working outdoors. They do need to be surrounded by responsive people who are uninhibited, and this is because they often can be so misunderstood because of their own suppression of their feelings, because they're not comfortable expressing who and what they are and what they feel. Sometimes this can be due to shyness, other times it can be due to them lacking self-confidence. But when they're around other people who might be suppressing their personalities and self as well, they can become very frustrated. So they need to be around people that generally are uninhibited, little free spirits that are comfortable being themselves. So people are going to have a soul urge of the number 6 if they've got the vowels totaling 6 or 15. And these people have this inner desire or an urge for love and creativity. They would be well advised, to grasp all opportunities to express their creative abilities, whether it's at home or in their place of employment, and to seek opportunities to express love and care, because if they can't, there becomes a tendency to become over anxious. And if this is the case, then it can manifest as depression and despair, and where they can start to feel mentally tormented and anguished. Okay. Now, in regard to the outer expression of the 6, this is going to occur when we have a sum of consonants that are 6, 15, 24, or 33. Most of their energy is going to be focused on the home, and they really need to apply balance. They need to restrain themselves somewhat to ensure that they don't overindulge, because there is the we've all got responsibilities. It's one thing to attend to the domestic needs and the needs of the family, but if it's taken to the extreme, it can result in quite negative and detrimental impacts for themselves and other members of the family. And this can occur, with pampering family members that inhibits and blocks the family members' capacity to develop and grow independence, but it can also impede their own ability to grow as well, because they are distracting themselves from their own growth by over accommodating to the needs of those people in their life that they care for. So it's not actually helpful, it backfires. So, in regard to the number 7, obviously it occurs when a soul urge will occur when the vowels equal 7 or 16. And these people are going to have this inner desire to teach or to support and help others. And as they mature, it becomes a motivating and driving force for them. They're not particularly receptive to receiving guidance and advice from others, surprise, surprise. And this reluctance to take advice from others can actually cause them a lot of grief until they learn that life is actually reciprocal, that relationships involved sharing information, that there's giving and taking, and not only that, that we both teach and learn at the same time. There is that saying, for every student I've ever taught, I have learned in multitude. So part of their evolution, of course, is to take this on board internally and recognize that actually it's not just about them telling other people what to do. And they might have this, I know better and I know the best way, but actually you have a good way of knowing and it might work really well for you, and it's certainly worthwhile of sharing, but let other people share with you as well. And to be open to receive actually is out there. All right, so let's take a look at the outer expression of the 7. This is going to occur when the consonants, if I can speak, when the consonants total 7, 16, 25, and 34. Once again, this business of taking advice, not perhaps actually saying they don't take advice. It's far more apparent when it's an outward expression, okay? They're very compelled to learn their own way and learning from experience. Now, we can easily turn around, I know I can, and sort of perhaps judge a person unkindly, thinking, well, why don't you take advice? What is wrong with you that you won't listen to the information that I give you that is actually quite good? Well, the reality is that actually this is how they learn. And, everybody learns differently. And if you've had more than one child, you're going to see it when you try and teach each one of your children different things. They all learn differently. And so for these people with the outer expression of a 7, they have to learn by experience, and as they learn and develop, they gain a real sense of satisfaction and personal achievement by discovering how to do things and the means, and they certainly internalize those lessons and experiences far more than if somebody told them what they should and shouldn't be doing. I mean, I suppose to some level we're all a bit like that, but it's far more prominent in a person with an outer expression of 7. So in regard to the number 8, the soul urge is going to occur when they've got the vowels summing or totaling the numbers of 8 or 17. Now, for these type of people, they can actually mentally dissociate from what they consider to be unconventional if they perceive that this unconventional is unreasonable and illogical. They have a really deep desire for independence, and they value the, if I can speak, individualist thought and freedom of expression. They would be well advised to ensure that they do not appear arrogant or aloof to others, because this is part of their lesson in life, and that is to participate in society without feeling trapped or bound. As far as the outer expression goes, this is the sum of the consonants where it equals 8, 17, 26 or 35. Now, once again, this desire for independence is a very strong desire, and it's an independence of expression and to be able to act as an individual. These people are quite brave. They've got strong personalities, and they are comfortable to dare to be different, to be true to who they are. And they are very much aware that personal and self-development means thinking outside of the box. So a soul urge of 9 is going to occur when the vowels total 9 or 18. And these people are always going to seek to improve the quality of life for others. They're guided by a very keen humanitarian sense and responsibility. But when they live negatively, they tend to demonstrate this over-ambitiousness with an idealism that is really quite imbalanced, and it can take them into egocentricity and often unsuccessful pursuits. So it's worth really paying attention to this if you're choosing a name for your child. The power of the soul urge of a 9, it needs to be respected, okay? Because people with this soul urge, they need to ensure that they remain emotionally detached from outcomes, and that the actions that they take are ones that are following their guidance, but we're guided towards a destination. But what might happen with this soul urge of the 9, if they become too locked onto the outcome, and rather than the process, the reality is they're going to start to feel burdened by this journey, if you like. So we want to encourage them to stay motivated and to achieve their goals, but to be relaxed and peaceful about how they take that approach, because, as I say, they can become really intense, and that just, if they're working towards a goal that's humanitarian, for example, something that's very important for them, it just can get to the point where they stop taking pleasure in the journey. So it's about having them be comfortable with the journey as well. Now, when we're talking about the outer expression, we're talking about people where the consonants of their name totals 9, 18, 27, and 36. Now, what we might see with these people based on their behaviours is an expression that seems to lose themselves in the more serious aspects of life, and consequently they can experience sadness and loneliness. And while they hold a really great potential for this deep contemplative reflection, and which leads of course to an expanded awareness and understanding of life, unless they manage to balance it and bring some lightness and pleasure into their life, they may experience negative impacts upon their social, emotional, and physical health and well-being. And this is potentially because they fall into the negativity of life with that focus. How would I describe it? I guess, look, we live in an uncertain world at the moment, and there's lots of stuff happening that just looks to be quite overwhelmingly sad if we focus on that. But somehow within that, to be able to live and survive and thrive and maintain peace and harmony internally, we have to be able to have that balance of being aware, knowing that it's happening, knowing when to let go, when to hold on, when to take actions, and all of this kind of stuff. So it's very important for the number 9 that they keep that balance there if this is their outer expression. So when it comes to the number 10, a soul urge is only going to occur of 10 when the vowels total 10 or 19. Now, with this soul urge comes a real metaphysical flexibility, if we like to call it that. It's an opportunity or a desire within them to put into practice a number of the psychic gifts, and this includes things such as clairvoyance, clairaudience, telepathy, astral projection, all of these things as a means to negate the limitations that are placed on a person by society. Okay, because these limitations suppress the individual expression. Now, when the person can access these gifts that are bestowed by the vibration in their daily life, they feel liberated from this earthbound state, and they're able to bring awareness of the divinity of life, the essence of life, to themselves and those around them. And this would actually probably be, I would hazard a guess, a driving force for them, a motivation for them. They're obviously caring people, and the 10 is associated with power anyway. And actually, because it's got the 0, this is the influence. And if you've looked at the ruling numbers and the content that I've put up, zeros is definitely associated with psychic ability. And of course, people have got choices. They can leave it latent or they can activate them. The person with a soul urge of 10 would be wanting to activate these gifts. So let's take a look at the outer expression. The outer expression is where the consonants will total 10, 19, 28, or 37. Now, this is an interesting outer expression because people are cautioned against being too flippant and even being a bit superficial. The power of the number is one that carries this beautiful positive attributes of being able to adapt and adjust to changes. This capacity to adjust is basically because they are capable of maintaining a balanced perspective and not taking each new event, basically looking at each new event that occurs, not taking it lightly, but understanding that there are new opportunities being presented with the changes and how this can actually help them or support them to fulfill their life path. Now, the other thing too is if they've got a number 10, they're going to need to apply determination to achieve their life goals. And part of their being able to achieve them and their responsibilities is to balance fun, because there actually probably is, where the 9 is concerned, where it might become a little bit too serious, left to its own devices without a little spattering of fun put in there. The polar kind of opposite happens with the outer expression of a 10. They're more likely to enjoy the fun without paying attention to the responsibilities. Now, they can be high achievers, but they've got to make sure that they stick to their responsibilities as well. So a soul urge of 11 can only occur when we have the sum of the vowels equaling 11, okay? And if they are born, or if they have a soul urge of 11, it really offers a valuable intuitive strength, and this strength balances the person, especially if they lack certain gifts in their chart. By having the number 11 in their soul urge, it's going to bring this intuitive elements or aspects as part of their personality traits, certainly the inner desires. And this is important because our intuition is actually our guiding force, if you like. So the ruling number, goodness me, I'm stumbling over my words. The soul urge of 11 is about assisting a person to have compassion for others and to be more sensitive to other people's feelings. And if a person didn't have this sensitivity or compassion in their birth charts, then they could end up being actually quite selfish people. So the number 11 actually is a really good soul urge to have. From an outer expression perspective, you can have an outer expression of 11 if the consonants total 11 or 29. And with this, we actually see behaviours that demonstrate a balanced spiritual and emotional expression. They are comfortable exhibiting these aspects of themselves. They can talk about how they feel, and they can talk, I guess, about their faith and their spirituality. It brings a longing to them to instill harmony into this environment and the people that they work with or socialise with. And it carries an emotional control with this heightened understanding of life and the processes. So it is only when the individual with this expression is allowed to walk this path that they're going to be able to find the full happiness that lies within. So just an interesting point there for number 11. So in regard to the number 22, which obviously I'm used to breaking it down 22/4, okay, it is actually a number 22 when it comes to name numerology, and it can only be the sum 22 when the consonants add up to that. There's no soul urge of a 22, but as an outer expression, it leads itself to exceptional organisational abilities, and this bodes very, very well for business and commercial enterprises. If the people have got a ruling number of 4, 8 or 22, then there may be a tendency to fixate on money-making ventures to the point of obsessiveness, actually. So they will need to take care to modify and balance this tendency, because obviously we all know the outcome of if somebody's focused purely on money and they forget about the other aspects of life, such as caring and being emotionally sensitive to other people, then it's going to have some really distinct negative impacts on the quality of their life and their relationships. So they are encouraged to balance the material aspects associated with this number as an outward expression, and that can be, because obviously I would say it goes without reason that these people will be financially successful, so then they will need to balance it with material aspects, or if I can speak, they will need to balance this material aspect by participating in charities or volunteer activities that help the disadvantaged. And the sooner that they find a cause that they're passionate about, then that would be one that they're encouraged to stick to across the life path. So it would be perhaps, let's say they've got, actually, I'm just thinking there is one young girl, I don't know what her numerology is, I haven't done it recently, but Angelina Jordan, I'm thinking about, she always performs barefoot because she made a statement when she was very young, I think when she was about 6 years old, she said that she would never perform in shoes until all young children had shoes. And this was her focusing her regard, shall we say, on people in poverty and homelessness. So it would be this kind of thing, encouraging them from a very young age to find something that they're passionate about. It can be a hobby, but it is something that they stick to across the life path. Realistically, it could be anything. And the other thing is if these people are limited with time, they're obviously going to have business acumen and the smarts and intelligence, if you like. So one of the other things that they could do as part of their philanthropy is to work on committees and donate their time, perhaps as a board member or something like that for a charity type organisation. So, as far as future videos go in this series, the only ones really left to do would be to talk about karma and how to calculate the karmic paths, which this is the detail that's on here. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to do this yet. It's actually really quite complex to do. It's very easy to make errors in your calculations. And so, for me to deliver this in this format actually might be a bit challenging for me as well, but I'll certainly give it consideration. But before I close out this video today, I want to remind you that we don't actually need to be doing the name numerology on the extended version of the name, the complete name. It's only the name that we use. And when we're trying to establish the perfect name for a person, I hope that you've actually picked up through this process when I was doing the soul urge and the outward expression that the reason why I would discourage Prince William from using the name William when he becomes king is because of the number of sixes that he's got in his name, which is this. Because of the amount of sixes, there's already a tendency there for him to fixate on his family. And by that, I mean Princess Catherine and his children, and to prioritise them. And of course, they should be prioritised to an extent, but there has to be a balance there because he's got a responsibility to the Crown, to the institution, and to the British citizens, which is interesting, and the citizens of the Commonwealth. Now, if he retains that name going forward, because of this outward expression in his name, that alone, go back and have a look at the outward expression of the six if you don't believe me, that alone carries a risk of fixation on the family to the point that we could actually even say it's smother love. It becomes a barrier for him, can actually cause problems for him as far as his own personal evolution goes, and also basically cripple his family members because he's got so much of the six there. It's so important to him. I'm not saying it's not a good thing to have. I'm just saying there needs to be balance. And this is what we get with numerology. It identifies these areas to balance out the personality. And definitely for Prince William, I would be looking, probably, I would say Richard is the only one that doesn't have some form of six in it. And so this is why I say that would be the best balancer one from there. Now, the other thing too, before I close out today, just a reminder that when I start doing things like the karmic reality and all of this kind of stuff, we're starting to look at what is referred to as the divine blueprint for an individual. And I've got to say, these are brilliant. I absolutely love them. But the point is that you can't calculate a divine blueprint unless you've got the birth time. And there's a lot of ifs, buts, and whens that happen when we're doing a numerology report that includes the karmic blueprint, or the divine blueprint rather. And when it comes to the birth number, which is the time of birth, that has to be calculated out correctly as well as part of ensuring that we get these other pathways correct as well. So complex, but really, if you're into numerology, but really interesting and revealing. So, as a duty of care to you, the viewer, I just want to make mention of the fact if you were going to get a full numerology report and speak to a numerologist and ask for one or purchase one or whatever, all we actually need is your full name, your birth date, your full name at birth as well, your birth date, and your birth time. Now, these are very personal details, and I would be cautioning people about providing these details via email to people that you don't know, to a platform that might not have good privacy and confidentiality or whatever. There's always a risk when we actually give this information out to people. Reputable, that was the word I was looking for, a reputable person. Don't share your information with people that are not reputable, or on a platform that is not considered to be reputable and doesn't have good privacy and confidentiality policies. Don't forget to look at them, because there is always a risk when we do stuff online that there will be identity theft occur. So just be a little bit cautious, okay? That would be my advice to you. So, my friends, that concludes today's video. I'm going to call it a day. Don't forget, I will put chapters in the description. I might even put links to all the other videos in the numerology series. because you will need to, as part of developing your own reports, go back and take a look at the meanings of ruling numbers and stuff like that. And so you may need to refresh yourself. So I will do that, and I will say thank you for joining me for now. I'm going to say take care. Catch you on the next video. Bye-bye for now.